In this video I'll show you how to then add the damage to your character. In the previous clip we create the pickup, so this one will be applying damage to the character when they walk into essentially a spike that we're going to place on the floor. Obviously that could be a fire, or it could be other things that cause damage to your character. So we've got the pickup system here that we just made. What we'll do now is add our dangerous hazard to the level. So again, like we do with the pickup, I'm going to make a new blueprint class and call this one HealthHazard. There we are. So the HealthHazard is going to be something spiky, so just to visually represent that, we'll use one of the just default cones in here, and I'll also add a collision. Again, I'll use the sphere collision for this and just make it slightly larger, like so. Now on the event graph, we're going to use the overlap again. And we'll do the same check as we did in the previous health pickup. So we can use a branch, and because we may have more than one player potentially, we're going to use the getClass function and check that the thing that bumps into this spike is actually the first person character, rather than an enemy or anything else that happens to walk into it. So if it's our first person character, then from the true pin we're just going to print a quick message just so we can debug and test. Just say ouch, and then we're going to use this ApplyDamage. Now there's various different ones here, but we're going to go for the standard ApplyDamage here. And the actor that gets damaged is obviously our first person character, so we've got a reference to that already on the begin overlap event, so we're just going to drag that here. This tells us which actor we want to cause damage to, and let's say it's going to cause us a damage of 20. Now the apply damage is quite useful. First thing you notice that it's network friendly, so that's useful if you're doing sort of online games, but also it gives you information, or you can give it information about who caused the damage and what instigated it. So for example, a damage causer in this case is the spike. So if we get a reference to self, that's kind of useful, because in a little while we're going to not just cause damage, but we're going to make our player sort of leap back a little bit, slightly out of danger, but also to kind of give you the impression that he's sort of flinched back in pain. And the event instigator, now this doesn't apply in our case here because the spike is just sort of sat on the floor, but imagine if it had been something that had been thrown by another player or an AI. The event instigator could be essentially the player who shot that particular weapon, as you can see on the little hover over detail there. And also you can give extra information about the type of damage that caused. So for example, it could be a bullet or a spear, or it could be something that squashed the player, that kind of thing. We'll leave that just blank in this case, but it's there if you do need it. So we're going to apply the damage to the player. We don't need to create a custom event inside the player because the damage system will do all that for us. We're just checking just to make sure it is the player that's walked into us before we do any damage application. But that should work for the health hazard. In our first person character then, we've just got to tell it what to do when we receive damage. And so we just right click and we look for an event called AnyDamage. So any damage that comes our direction, we're just going to first of all, just for debugging purposes, we're going to print string, use the append again like we did previously, just to give us a little bit of information about what this damage was. So let's say the damage was by the damage causer, so that'll tell us basically which actor in the level inflicted this damage upon the player. And let's just check at this point that it does actually work. So we'll do that. We'll do a save all just in case. And once that's saved, we're going to add our health hazard to the level, so we'll place it just over here. So all it'll do is just give us a message at the minute with any luck. So there you can see in the top corner there, it's saying damage by health hazard, and it prints our ouch message. The damage by health hazard is just a name that this actor has in the level. So if we were to rename this Spike 1, for example, then when we run our game, this time it should say in the top there, damage by Spike 1. So that just gives us an indication as to which thing caused the damage. If you were to duplicate this, maybe have a Spike 2, as it shows there, then we can see that Spike 2 damaged us, Spike 1 damaged us. So it's kind of useful to be able to do that. Now I'll just clean up the blueprint slightly. And I'm going to put a comment around the pickup. Like so. Okay, so let's cause some damage to the player. So I'm going to first of all add a sequence. Now the sequence just lets us run two different bits of blueprint in order. Now the first pin here, I'm going to leave that blank for the minute, because that's going to be the bit that leaps us backwards from the spike once we walk into it. I'm just going to pull our sequence from pin 1. And just so we can see what happens when we subtract some health, we're going to do a print string. And we're also just going to set, if we just set our health here as well. So we'll just link it up like so. So we're going to subtract whatever damage was caused to us, and then we're going to print how much health we've got left afterwards. So first of all, to subtract our health value, we need to choose the get health. Once we've got that current value, which by default we've set to 60, we're going to subtract from our health value, float minus float, we're going to subtract whatever damage was caused to us, like so. So whatever health is then gets subtracted a value. We're going to do another clamp, because you don't necessarily want your health going below 0. It might cause sort of strange things to happen with the UI and other things in your level. So we're just going to clamp it between the value of 0 and 100 again, just like we did with the pickup. Once we've clamped that value, then we're going to print our new value to the screen. So we'll use our append method like so, and we'll just give us a little message. That tells us what our new health is. Okay, so we're going to compile and we're going to test that now. So with any luck, we should see there's a little bug there for some reason. Oh yeah, we didn't link up our health value there. It was overwriting with a 0, so you just got to make sure that you actually remember to set the health value there. So there we are. So we subtract the health, we clamp it, we then reset the health to this new value. And we should see this time, that's it. So health gone down to 40 because it subtracted a value of 20 from us. It's gone down to 20. Health's gone to 0. And then we find now that health is staying at 0, which is fine. But obviously, we'd like our player to die at that point, I suppose. So we just need to do another check here. So we could do a branch, and we could check for our health value being either equal to or less than 0. So if it gets to 0 or anything below 0, then we're going to run from our troop in here, and we're going to say print string player dead. Yeah. Okay, so compile, and that's all fine. So this time when we walk into our spikes, gone down to 40%, 20%, and then we've lost all our health and the player's now dead. Now obviously it doesn't actually kill us, but at that point you could reset the level, or you could go to another level, or whatever it is you wanted to do with your player. So that's very briefly an apply damage event working. Now, one last thing to show you is how to get the player to leap backwards, and I'll show that in the next clip.